Hey, everybody, this is Alan with Meet the Thriller Author. And on the podcast today, I have David Yoon in Los Angeles, not too far from San Francisco.
Hello.
Hi, David. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So very fascinating because you have been a very successful YA author already. A few bestsellers under your belt, and then Version Zero is your first adult thriller. Is that correct?
Yeah. So before version 0, I wrote Frankly in Love, and that's the one that became a bestseller, which is nice. And also Super Fake Love Song, which I think was an indie bestseller. I can't remember. It's on my website. Yeah, and so I started out in YA, which I love. But I worked for over 12 years in like the tech industry, and there was just a lot of unresolved thoughts about my time there, and still are. And so I knew I had to write a book about it.
And were you a fan of like thrillers and mysteries before you decided to write that, or?
I mean, I love thrillers and mysteries because they're so plot driven,
Mm-hmm.
and so much stuff just happens in them. I sort of grew up on a lot of Stephen King and books like that, and so there's a lot of that in my blood, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's so cool that you're with the whole your tech background in using it to turn it into a thriller. So, and being that I'm in San Francisco, we're talking about that offline. So I was very fascinated with your subject matter of your book. Can you tell us a little bit about that, about the background and how your book came together and what it's about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the book revolves around this 20-something tech entrepreneur. He's like this tech genius guy. He's a whiz kid. His name is Max. He believes in the industry, and he actually believes that tech can make the world a better place. And so he blows the whistle on the social media company that he works for because they're doing shady stuff with user data, and he doesn't like it. So he blows the whistle, immediately gets fired, immediately gets blacklisted in the industry, and is sort of crestfallen. He has a crisis of faith about the industry that he used to love. And so he decides to sort of exact revenge / go on a social justice mission to expose the evils of these big 5 tech companies through a series of hacks that just get crazier and crazier. So that's what the story is.
Yeah, and that's I just watched a documentary recently on Netflix about tech guys who are with all these social media companies who are now having second thoughts of of their role involved in all that. Is that something you think that a lot of people are struggling with that were in the tech industry?
Oh, totally. I mean, I was always fascinated by the fact that, like, a lot of tech CEOs wouldn't allow their kids to use iPads, to use social media, to use their own products.
Yeah.
And, I've over the 12 years working in the tech industry, I've worked for social media companies. I've worked for cybersecurity, ad technology, not advertising, but also I've done that too, but ad technology. And that's the technology that tracks you and gathers data. And in that company in particular, all my coworkers, to a single person, we all had ad blockers installed on all our devices and proxies. And so we were kind of like non-smokers stuck working at William for Philip Morris.
Yeah.
We're just like, we're good at it. We're smart. They're all good people, very ingenious. But we were stuck making this thing that we didn't actually believe in and actually didn't actually like. Believe it or not, it took me a while to realize that. And once I did, I was like, what exactly are we doing here? And I also realized that it wasn't just a technological problem. It was also a problem with sort of capitalism in general, because technology and capitalism, in the words of Ted Chiang, are so inextricably intertwined that sometimes you can't tell the difference.
Yeah, and it seems to me from not in the tech industry, but it seems to me from living here and in the Bay Area is you guys, the tech workers are kind of like in their own little bubble. Like before the pandemic, everything was right there on campus, like the gym, hair, doctors, like you guys are like hostages or something. I don't know, like Stockholm syndrome or something going on in there.
It's true that I think that has its roots in 60s counterculture. That's when sort of ARPANET was invented. That's all these nerds were up in the Bay Area were figuring out like how to make Apple computers or how to make HP computers in a garage. was during that countercultural time. And so you've got this idea of remaking the world using different rules. And at the same time, you have this amazing technology that promises to be able to build that utopia in a way that's egalitarian and democratic, and there's no rules, also no ownership. It's like, so it's a perfect storm of hippie ideals and tech engineering, the belief that engineering can solve any social problem. What we didn't really anticipate was the capitalist aspect. The corporations would have to run everything. And so once that started to really seep in with like VC funding and, you know, your typical business KPIs, and that, it kind of changed everything. But there's still an undercurrent of utopianism. And that's why I think you have these tech bubbles. Literally in Seattle, you've got Amazon bubbles as a campus. I think that's so funny. But it's an effort to recreate the world in your vision and make it a utopia, or a dystopia, some might say.
And is this a standalone book, or is it going to be part of a series, or?
This will be a standalone book for
Okay.
sure. Yeah. But, what happens in it can't sort of be. Anyway,
no spoilers.
Give away any spoilers.
And so I was also reading in your bio that that you and your wife are launching your own YA imprint for focusing on authors or people of color, and it's called Joy Revolution, and it's going to be part of Random House's children's book. How did all that come together, and how does it feel being on the other side of that business?
It feels really weird. We don't ask for numbers. We're like, just get the book sold. You know, we want to buy the book. Just don't tell us how much, because it'll mess with our heads as writers. But yeah, it's a long-standing dream. Me and Nikki, my wife Nicola Yoon, she wrote Everything, and The Sun Is Also a Star, and her forthcoming book is called Instructions for Dancing. It comes out actually like a week after version 0 comes out, so it's busy around.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah, but we met at Emerson College in the writing program, and we always wondered, like, why aren't there love stories starring people who look like us? You know, we're always like the sidekick, or in the case of Black girls, it's always the sidekick or the bus driver. And in the case of Asian guys, it's always like the foreigner, the exchange student, the tech, the lab tech, or the kung fu guy. Never the romantic lead. And we kicked around ideas for like short story contests maybe that we could host, or small press ideas, but we had no idea what we're talking about until we got published. And once we got published, then we're like, hey, wait a second, now we have resources. And fortunately, Barbara Marcus, who's the president at Random House, she was totally on board. Like before we could finish the sentence, she was like, yes, let's do this. And so we have their full support, and it's been really amazing.
Yeah, that's great, because that's the best way of changing, and everyone's talking about doing all these changes, but that's you guys are actually now there doing this. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's really exciting because, you know, so many times the books featuring people of color are usually there to teach a lesson about racism or something, and they're usually pretty painful to read. I mean, I think those are valuable books, because if we forget the struggle, then we forget the struggle. But there's the other side, which I like to call the Harold and Kumar side.
Yeah.
You ever see that movie?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's awesome. It's like two people of color, Asian guy, Indian guy, and all they want to do is get high and get snacks. Yeah. And I'm like, yes, that is the other side of the equation, where people are allowed the full breadth of their humanity. They're just normal people who just want normal things. And that is equally valuable, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's room for everything, right? I mean,
totally. Yeah.
Just fun reads, more heavy reads, but yeah, that's awesome. And so, are you going to continue writing YA as well yourself, or are you going to be straddling the thriller and the YA worlds, or what are your plans?
You know, I think I'm going to do a little bit of both. Cool. Honestly, I think that you can learn a lot from any age group. At any age group. So like if you're like my age and like almost 50, I can learn a lot from a middle grade book. And I also think that, you know, younger people, like people in their 20s, can learn a lot from a book written by someone in their 70s. And so I do have, you know, some young adult ideas. I'm actually working on one right now with Nikki. So that's exciting. We're co-authoring something. I have another adult book coming out probably in 2022. It's a post-apocalyptic kind of I wouldn't call it a thriller. It looks like a thriller, but it's not. And I do really like the idea of writing for middle grade or for younger kids. I mean, at Emerson, my dissertation, which was an anthology of short stories, that was almost all starring middle grade kids for some reason. Um, so probably some unexamined stuff from my childhood that I'm exploring there.
Yeah, your therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you is that something like, do you enjoy when you're writing these books, do you like, can you go back and forth? Is the process the same? I'm just kind of curious about, I mean, the foundation is the same, right? Regardless whether it's YA or a thriller, or is your
Right.
process
Yeah.
different?
I mean, the process is the same. You're writing a book. It's
Yeah.
a huge pain in the butt. It takes for you know. I mean,
Oh yeah.
you've worked on your own stuff. It takes forever. There's all this doubt. The difference, I think, personally, and this is just me talking between YA and adult, is YA is for teens. So there's a lot of librarians and teachers involved who want to teach their kids things that are knowable. And so I think YA deals a lot with stuff that we sort of figured out, you know. Um, I think adult is more comfortable with stuff that's unknowable or stuff that we haven't worked out yet. And the internet, in my opinion, is very much we don't know. The jury's still out. Like is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do we even actually need it? Does it actually do us any good? Those are all questions that I don't think are answered yet. The internet was created as like a Cold War defense to spread out our network so that any one attack wouldn't take the whole system down. But other than that, it really wasn't created with any particular problem in mind. So it was this massive solution with no real problem, and instead wound up creating a bunch of other problems that we have other solutions now for, and so on and so on. I just find it interesting.
And so are you writing now? You're no longer in the tech business. You're now focusing on your writing and publishing business.
Yeah, I went full time with writing like 3 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was nice. Like, but at the same time, I loved my job. I have to say, like, especially toward the end, I worked for, I like to say, the good guys, a cybersecurity firm, and we were tackling the toughest problem of all, which is not sort of spam bots, but social engineering. And that's just people to people. That's just con men, trying to take your money.
Yeah.
It just happened to be through computers.
Yeah, I just saw a video on that on that guy who makes those glitter boxes. I don't know if you've seen that, but
the ones that explode when you open them.
Yeah, he was doing it for the Porsche pirates, but now he did it for the scammers. And recording these scammers on these old people that are naive, and it's just so sad. But it's like, it's a crazy world out there. I didn't even realize what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is you can scam people at scale now. Everything with the internet is at scale. And so all the bad stuff that people normally do, hate speech and racism and scams and theft, can now be done at a humongous scale anonymously. And that's sort of one of the things that Max in version 0 is really sensitive about. He wants to like make the internet a good place, and he has ideas about how to do that. And he enlists his friend Akiko, who's like this beautiful programmer who he's had a crush on, but she's with his best friend, so she's off limits, and he's like in the friend zone. So there's that whole romantic triangle going on. It's not even a triangle. He's just like a third leg somewhere off in space. But yeah, and so that's his whole mission. He's very idealistic about. We have this amazing tool that we built, not knowing exactly what we're doing. So maybe we should try to figure out how to use it for good and not for scammers.
Yeah. I get worried about my 88-year-old mother. She's on Facebook now and stuff. So,
oh my God, really?
Yeah.
What's that like?
Scary. She hasn't gotten scammed or anything, but I keep telling her, to be careful, don't trust people on there. I mean, it really is like it's like a little child. Like, don't touch the stove. Be careful.
Yeah. And now I hear that. What is this like push to have like Facebook for kids or Instagram for kids or something?
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, I was like, there's Messenger for kids, so they're rolling this stuff out.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, so you want to make our kids full of envy and self-hatred at a younger age.
Let's start
And
younger. We've already moved on
like,
through this people. Let's start. We gotta go younger.
right?
Yeah, that was a tobacco too, right? Like
Oh my
you mentioned that
God.
before, like the Joe Camel or whatever, the cartoon.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I actually saw an old Joe Camel billboard the other day out in the middle of the desert. And I was like, I forgot about this guy. That was so evil.
Yeah, yeah. We
So
grew up with it.
evil.
Grew up it normally. I'm 53, so as a kid, it was
Yeah,
normal to
yeah.
see those Joe Camel and all that stuff. So yeah, it's just crazy.
I wonder if this generation will be like, hey, remember Messenger for Kids? That was messed up.
Hopefully that's how they'll remember
Hopefully, yeah.
it. So what's your project now? You say you're working on on another book now. Is that going to come out next year?
Yeah, this was actually it. I started writing this book. It's called City of Orange, and it was acquired by Mark Tavani, who's my editor at Putnam. And Mark Tavani worked on version 0 too, and he's fantastic. He's like a mind reader. I don't know how he does it. He tells me stuff about my books that I didn't even realize, and I was like, I play it cool. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I meant that. But it's probably going to come out in 2022. I'm not really sure when. And it started out as a NaNoWriMo book. I don't know
Oh
if,
yeah.
yeah, which is National Write a Novel Month. I think I started it about 6 years ago. And my wife, Nikki, was like, just do it. I'll take care of the baby. Just go do it for a month. And so I did it. And when I reached that 55K word limit or goal, I was like, my heart was palpitating. I finally understood marathon runners. But anyway, the book is it's a post-apocalyptic story about this guy who wakes up with no memory of how he got there, and he starts to embark on a journey to find his wife and daughter and see where they are. Um, but yeah, that's definitely an adult book for sure.
I'm kind of curious about your process too, your writing process. Do you outline or do you write by the seat of your pants?
There's this great metaphor that I was talking to David Arnold, who's also a young adult author, and he was like, it's like taking a road trip at night. Um, and you know what cities you're gonna hit. There's no signal, so you can't use GPS. So you don't know how you're gonna get to the city, but you will get to the city. And all you can see is what's in front of you in the headlights. And so that's kind of how I write, which is like, I know the big act breaks, what should probably happen, but how to get there, like all the nuts and bolts, I don't know. I've done that once, actually with version 0. I did like a whole beat sheet, and it was a disaster because I started to just go on autopilot and not trust my instincts.
Yeah. I know. I've interviewed people who like wrote 40,000 word outlines and then threw it away, and so yeah,
It's so true.
yeah, we're
It's so
yeah,
true.
different different ways of doing things, but yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm curious about your tools that you use too. Do you write on Word or some other software program or?
You know what, man? Like I just use Pages
No,
on a
okay,
Mac.
Pages, yeah.
I've tried Word, I can't stand.
Mhm.
It's too many features, and also Option Delete deletes the whole word and then the space preceding it. Why? Nothing else in Mac does that. So when you're hauling ass writing, it trips you up every time. I tried Scrivener, it's too complicated for me. I've tried like the minimal writers like IA Writer and whatever, and they're too simple. So Pages, I think, it's free
Mhm.
and it works great, and it's kind of only all I need personally.
Cool. Yeah, I was curious about that, but especially with your tech background. So that's interesting to hear that. I was the same way too. I think I tried just about everything out there. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're both advanced compared to my wife, who writes longhand. She's nuts.
oh wow,
Yeah,
really? Wow, no way. I couldn't even understand. I wouldn't be able to read my own handwriting.
yeah. And she'll has the same problem. She's like, I don't really know what I meant, so I'm gonna have to make something up
So
because I
she
can't
writes
read my handwriting.
longhand and then she like types it in.
Yeah, and that's
Oh,
another like layer of the editing process.
oh wow.
It's
Yeah,
kind of interesting.
yeah, that is interesting. Yeah. And so before I let you go, David, I always like to ask my guests about advice because I have aspiring writers that listen to this podcast. So, an aspiring writer that's listening to this, what's some advice that you could offer them?
I always tell people the advice that I heard from Margaret Atwood. I got to see her at the Canadian Embassy in Tokyo, of all places. But she said, read, 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 and write. And that means read everything you can get your hands on, even stuff that, especially stuff that you might think you might think you won't like, because it'll expose you to something unexpected, and you might wind up liking it. And it might give you different ideas about different techniques or kind of story ideas. And then while you're doing that, just keep on writing. Write every day if you can. Even if you write, I've done the math. Even if you write like an hour a day for every weekday, not including holidays and weekends, so you still get your holidays and weekends, like you will wind up with like a 300 to 400 page novel, first draft. So the steady drip of writing is super key. Don't try to do it all at once. Just keep it, like make it a habit. And the more you write, the better you get. The better, it's like a muscle. So it'll exercise your skills, and it'll make you more open to showing your work to other people and making you more open to feedback. And speaking of which, my last piece of advice is, if you can afford it, go to an MFA program. If you can't, which I understand because they're really expensive, get a writers group together of people who are serious. The only reason I recommend an MFA program is because it's a shortcut to find serious people. But if you can find serious people without an MFA program, you're good too.
That's great advice. Great advice. And so where can the listeners find you? What's your website?
It's just davidyoon.com.
Okay. Yeah, I love your website. I was checking it out
Oh, thanks, man.
earlier. Yeah, I really like the design. And your book cover is of version 0 is awesome. Did you like that cover when you first saw that?
Oh my God, I scored so big. I got so lucky
That's
with that cover.
amazing. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, and that was like an in-house design at Penguin. I got so lucky. They did such a great
Wow.
job.
Yeah.
So I'm just like showing it to everyone I can get my hand.
Yeah. I remember that.
asks.
Yeah, with the when the publicist reached out to me, that was the first thing I saw was that cover. I was like, whoa, that's some interesting cover. It's like, it really calls you in. So,
Yeah.
all right. So so version 0, it'll be out May 25th.
That's right.
So yeah, so good luck with your book launch and all that fun stuff.
Thank you so much.
For listeners, go pick up version 0. And David, it was a pleasure talking to you, and good luck with everything.
It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.